this thing called love? Yeah, what is this thing called love? Great song by Cole Porter, and I'm going to do a little tutorial on it today. It's basically a bunch of 2-5-1s. So, I mean, if you could play this song, you could probably play Giant Steps and Tune Up and a lot of other great songs that are based on 2-5-1s, and almost every jazz standard is full of them. So we should really look at them in depth here a little bit. So the first one is what we'll call a minor 2-5-1, because the 2, the 5 leads to a 1 chord which is minor. So we're calling it a minor 2-5-1, and this is a rather typical one in that the 2 chord is a minor 7 flat 5. That's typical for a minor 2-5-1. And then the 5 chord, which is C7, will also usually have some altered tensions. And so I'm going to play my C7 like this with a flat 9. Now, if I had a regular 9 in there, that's not an altered tension. That's just a regular 9. So it needs either a flat 9 or a sharp 9 or one of the other 2 altered tensions. So I'm just going to do it like this, and you see with that little, looks like a diminished chord, but you know, it's not G diminished, it's C 7th. And I'll be using the diminished scale there. And then for the F minor, the real book chart just says F minor. A lot of people play this as F minor 6th, and typically in a minor 2-5-1, you do go to a minor 6 chord as your 1 chord, but you can also go to the minor 7th chord. Now, the advantage to playing the minor 7th chord there is that the very next 2-5-1 is D minor 7 flat 5, which is exactly the same chord as F minor 6. Look, F minor 6, put the D down there on the bottom, and it's D minor 7 flat 5. So if you use F minor 7th as your 1 chord, and then go to the next 2-5-1, you can at least have a little bit of change in the harmony there. Otherwise, you're kind of on the same chord and same scale there as you end one 2-5-1 and begin the next one. So just to recap, the first 2-5-1 is like this, or that, okay? And then the next 2-5-1, here's our D minor 7 flat 5, our G7, and we call this a major 2-5-1 because we're ending on a major chord, okay? So typically, a major 2-5-1 would have a 2 chord like this, a minor 7th, but in this song, it's a minor 7 flat 5. Now, that's a little unusual for a 2-5-1 that's ending in a major key, but not that uncommon. Now, once again, I'm going to use G7 with an altered tension there. I'm going to have the flat 9 in there, and once again, I'm going to use a diminished scale when I play over that chord, and in C major. Okay, that's the A section. Now, there's one other 2-5-1 in this song, and it starts the B section, and it is simply C minor, F7 to B flat major 7. So of course that's a major 2-5-1, and this one follows the typical, and this one is probably the most conventional 2-5-1 in the song because it's a minor 7, then a dominant 7th, that's F dominant 7th, and B flat major 7th. And then there's one other little section of the song, the second half of that B section, which is just A flat 7th to G 7th, both dominant chords. And we'll probably come up with some nice voicings for those, like these box voicings. And I'll call them rootless voicings. Let's call them rootless voicings today. So, the A section of the song with the chords, and now the melody. B section. the A section. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about soloing over this song. G minor 7, flat 5. Okay, a couple different scales work on this. You can have Locrian mode, and that's an easy one to find. Just think up a half step to A flat and play that major scale. All right, now it might not sound like it really fits the chord, but it does. And, you know, the reason they call this Locrian mode is because, you know, you're not starting on A flat. You're playing the A flat scale, but starting down on the 7th degree of the scale, and then using all the notes from the A flat major scale. All right, and of course when you're improvising, it doesn't matter where you start or end. You could, you know, use just little parts of it or whatever you want to do. All right, and then we're going to get to our C7th, and here's the diminished scale that fits this. Now, any diminished chord, if you just start on one of the notes in the chord and go up a whole step and then a half step, you'll have the diminished scale. So I could pick any one of those notes, D flat, just go up a whole step, keep going with whole step and half step, right? Or I could approach any of those chord tones with a half step. So I look at my chord, I say, well, I'll start on E flat. And then I'm going to end on, and I think I'll try to end on F minor 7th as often as I can. And here on F minor 7th, you know, any minor scale really will work. Minor melodic ascending is fine. Even though it clashes a little bit with the chord right there, you can still use it. Or you could adjust your chord to make that scale work better. Or you could use Dorian mode. Or you could use some blues scale. All those will sound nice over that chord. So using these scales now, the A flat major scale, or if you prefer, Locrian mode, G Locrian, and then transition into the diminished scale, and then transition into the F minor scale. All right? And when you're just learning to do this, it's a good idea to try to, you know, just play like 8 notes per measure, like eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. You got to stop someplace, obviously. And then as you get better, you can start chopping it up into melodic ideas. All right, now I did a few notes there that were not in the scale, so let me try that again. Now we're going to do our 2-5-1 in C major, but you know, it starts more like a minor 2-5-1 with the minor 7 flat 5. So we use the same kind of thing. We're going to use Locrian mode. That's the E flat right there, E flat major, right? And then this diminished scale, all right, and ending in C. All right, when we're in C, white keys are great. And I've kind of avoided hitting the root and the 4th there. I'm trying to kind of working on the other notes. Those other notes actually make a G pentatonic scale. So that's kind of what I like to play on a C major. All right, it makes my lines end on kind of cooler, nicer sounding notes. Like if you end your line on C, for instance, like this. Even if I did a C6th, I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. But generally, you're aiming for things like the 9th or the 7th or the 3rd or something like that to, you know, give it a hipper sound. So here we go, Locrian mode, then diminished scale, and I ended on the 9th. And I actually started the diminished scale a little bit early, like I was in Locrian, and then, well, there's some of the same notes in both scales, but right You can actually get there a little quicker. I ended on the 5th. That's something I do way too much, and I'm trying to avoid that in my own playing, at least for a while, until I kind of break myself of the habit of always ending on the 5th. The 9th is just so much better. So is the sharp 11 too. Okay, now we get to a very typical 2-5-1, and this one's in the key of B flat, so we're going to start on the 2 chord of C minor. I think for this one I'm going to come up here and play an inversion, and then a root position chord, and then this B flat. That will be an inversion too. Now, I will say this about soloing is that if you play all these chords like in this area, your solo ends up being up here a lot. And you know, the piano sounds good right in the middle register. It's kind of a vocal range. So you want to kind of play in this register when you're soloing also. And the best way to do that is leave the left hand out or play chord shells like C minor, F7, B flat. You could do it this way, things like that. Now when you do that, your solo you have to be careful to kind of define the chord. Like for instance, I don't have a 3rd here on my C minor, so maybe my line would be, you know, using the 3rd in there and outlining the chord a little bit, or using a scale and making sure that note is emphasized a little bit. All right, let me do that again. Used a little diminished scale that time. So first, this is Dorian mode, and now this is, you know, the easiest kind of 2-5-1 to play over, your typical major 2-5-1, because if whatever chord you're ending on, your 1 chord, the B flat, that's the scale that you can use with all 3 chords. You can think Dorian mode and Mixolydian mode, but it's all B flat major scale, so just stay there. But to spice up your line, on the 5 chord, there's so many possibilities. There's, you know, diminished scale, and that's what I'm going to use now. I'm going to play it like this. There's my F7th, but it looks like a diminished chord because of that flat 9, and so this diminished scale will work. All right, and you know what I just realized is in these 3 2-5-1s, if you use the diminished scale on the 5 chord, you have to use 3 different diminished scales. And that's all there really are, because the diminished scale, let's look at one of them right here. It repeats itself. I mean, if you go up to E flat and do the same pattern of a whole step and half step, you'll get the exact same scale. So there are really only 3 diminished scales that exist in nature, all right? So you got this one, and this one. All right, so it really makes sense to get these diminished scales under your fingers because it will really improve your soloing if you don't have this already. So here's our last 2-5-1 in the B section. So I'm using C Dorian, but it's a B flat scale. And then I'm going to switch into that diminished scale. And I ended on the 5th again. Damn it. Yeah. Now, if I would have ended like that, right on the beat, I would have come out on the root, which I didn't want to do, so I ended early. Like that. I kind of anticipated 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that gave me a better jazz rhythm, and it gave me a better note to end on. Now, let me briefly just cover the other little section of the song. After this 2-5-1, we have an A flat chord, and here I'm using a box voicing. And now, let me call this by what it really is. It's a rootless voicing. But the reason I call it a box voicing is because my teacher years ago analyzed these chords and made a little box and wrote the chords in there and then how they could be used. And this particular chord shape we call box 1. Here it is in a different key. All right, box 1. And here I'm using it as an A flat 7th chord. There's my 7th and 3rd. And here's a 9th and a 13th. So we can't say it's an altered dominant, but it's a dominant with some tensions, the 9th and the 13th. Now, there are other box voicings that will give you those tensions, those altered tensions. And in fact, this one can be altered tensions if you use it as a different chord, like a D dominant. See, D dominant with a flat 13 and a sharp 9. So, these box voicings are mostly rootless voicings, but sometimes they'll function and they'll actually have a root in them. Use it as A flat 7. And then we're going to go to G7 and just take it down there, okay? And what scale can we use? I'm using Lydian dominant there, but you could use Mixolydian mode. That would just be an A flat scale with a flat 7 and a G scale with a flat 7. All right, so those are easy scales to use. So here's the B section now, the bridge of the song. First we have our standard 2-5-1 in the key of B flat. Sometimes it bounces back and forth. Now, if you're using the real book chart from the old real book, I think there's really kind of a mistake down here in the bottom A section. It should be more like the top A section. Right here, they've got originally the song just was G7 here. So they've done a tritone substitution first. D flat 7 and then the G7, but I don't know anybody who plays it that way. Everybody just plays it as a regular 2-5-1, and I think it's much stronger that way. So if your bass player is using the real book chart, scratch that little D flat 7th out and put D minor 7 flat 5. It's a better change. And I consulted the original score of this song too, and there's no hint of that D flat 7th chord there. Could talk a little bit more about advanced soloing ideas, and for this let me get my laundry list here. Okay, and I've been trying to make this stupid video now for like 3 days, and I've been trying to just put way too much. I try to put everything in my laundry list here, and since we're using the diminished scale a lot, let's explore a little bit of that. So our first change here is and then we're going to use diminished scale here. Now in the diminished scale, there's all kinds of little patterns because it's such a symmetrical scale of going whole step, half step, whole step, half step. You can take little patterns, move them around in minor thirds. Why minor thirds? Because look, a whole step plus a half step makes a minor third, and that's where the scale starts to repeat itself. So you've got these repeating intervals. So if you find something that works, something that's in the diminished scale, like those three, this is the diminished scale I'm using right now. Okay. So those 3 notes are in it. I could take those 3 notes and move them up by a minor third, another minor third. Anything you can find that works there, you can move it around in minor thirds, just like you can move the chord around in minor thirds. All right? And if you're using a hipper box voicing like this one, you can move that around in minor thirds and play the diminished scale right over top of it. Sorry, I screwed that up. Let me do it right here. Ending there on my F minor 6-9 chord. And there's another box voicing, by the way. So let's look at another pattern here. All right, There's my C7th. I'm still thinking diminished, even though I'm just playing a basic C7th chord down there. So those are all notes in the diminished scale. Here we go. I'm using that pattern. Now, how did I transpose that pattern so quickly? Well, it's just like doing advanced math. You have to start with, multiplication tables and how to add and that kind of thing. And, once you can do that, then you can grasp higher concepts. So, for instance, I know my major triads really well on the piano. And this is a triad, and that's a triad, and that's one, and that's one. And I just moved them down in minor thirds, and I put a little approach note in front of each one, because that approach note is also in the diminished scale. And I went, that's the first triad, there's the next one, there's the next one. All right, so that would be a harder one to do there. I've never done that one before, but that's a kind of a good idea. I should work on that. And there's so many other patterns, There's that, and there's things like that. You can do this with two hands. You can go like Chick Corea does that kind of thing a lot. And then just this basic shape like this can be moved around. So lots of cool stuff with the diminished scale. And I just thought I'd show you something for those of you that made it to the very end of this video. A couple of Art Tatum riffs here. So let me check my book. I really like this guy, Ricardo, however you say that last name, Civales. He's done a really great book on playing Latin piano. I have that book, and this is the right hand according to Tatum. In other words, God's right hand. All right, so where's that riff? Yeah. Yeah, I've changed it a lot. So that would fit over like a D dominant 7th chord, or F sharp minor 7 flat 5. All right, so let's transpose this up a half step and use it for G minor 7 flat 5. So. See how cool that sounds on that first chord. What is this thing? Now I've forgotten it. All right, so I'm just throwing it in a very kind of straightforward way there. But that's a cool Tatum lick. And another thing he likes to do is do these ascending riffs. So like if you were doing something like do little 4-note things. And what I've noticed is usually he does the ones that are like kind of easy to play. He doesn't try to do one that doesn't fit well under the fingers. So, something like that seems good, that's good, that's good. So something like, I don't know, went for a bad one there. Something like that. And then one I just discovered out of this book the other day, and I've known about this riff for a long time, but I've never really used it. It's kind of an octave thing where you go like this, like that. So maybe this will work. Let's see if I can do something better. So that doesn't really fit exactly what I'm doing there, but you get the idea. You can find good ways to use that. So I think that's a wrap for today. It's a fun song to play. It's great for practicing 2-5-1s, and wow, practice this song in a bunch of different keys, and I think it'll really increase your ability. 1, 2, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4.